and there's people trying to take your picture and all sorts. And I just said to my wife, I said, oh my goodness, look at where we are. We're two folks from Southampton or East the area, and here we are stood in Portofino on a mega yacht with a glass of whatever going, and you think, yeah, life's treated me okay as far as that's concerned.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So welcome again to another edition of Sense of Identity. As you probably all know, those of you that listen to this podcast, this is all about trying to get under the covers a bit for some people with whom we're connected, with whom we work, but people that do interesting stuff. Obviously drawing the strings together of that, I'll explain why. I'm delighted to have with us today Mike Wimbridge, who's the MD of Pantaenius. So welcome firstly, Mike.
Good morning, nice to be here.
And a little bit of sunny weather today. It's been a bit of a stormy weekend, which means you'll guess when this has been recorded, anybody that's listening to this. But if I may, and this is all about you, Mike, and Pantaenius, really, to sort of explain. I'll just do a very brief intro and then fire a few questions, and then we'll go from meander like we normally do in these sessions. But part of the reason I was really keen to get Mike and Pantaenius on the call was we've had some really interesting chats, Mike, and for me, there's the connection between what we do and I guess what you do in your world, and we'll talk about that, is risk. We deal with different areas of risk, different vectors, if you like. But just to give a very potted history, and I'm not going to do it justice, so Mike, you'll be able to continue this on. But Pantaenius, from what I understand, you guys have been around for a long time. I think when I actually looked up the real history, it was like way back to 1899, although I think you say 50 years, so you're being a bit modest on that already, which might, that's a flavour of things to come. But you've been involved as a specialist yachting broker globally now for a long time, hundreds of thousands of customers, which is amazing. You, I know, work the globe over. I think you mentioned Denmark and Sweden, Spain, Austria, Greece, even as far as Australia and New Zealand now. So a massive European footprint, but well beyond that. I think you mentioned that you were one of the largest yachting broking sort of insurance providers in the world. And the really interesting one that I thought was cool was you mentioned that you were the first to write a private yacht policy. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But your background as well, and I looked into that using the faithful LinkedIn, was interesting too, because you've come right through from an underwriting position into broking and then obviously into this global world. So maybe we start by saying, apart from saying thanks for joining, and I'm going to try and shut up a bit now, is tell us more about you, your background, and Pantaenius and your reach, because that's extraordinary.
Yeah, it really, really is. So yeah, no, again, delighted to be here. Thank you. Yeah, the 30-second commercial for Mike Wimbridge PLC. My background is my father was a military man, so in my younger days I moved around a lot. Ironically enough, I was born in Germany, so almost full circle. Here we are, 55 years later, working for a German company. But no, I ended up, when my father came out of the military, based down here in actually we were in Southampton at the time. A very fine organisation called Royal Insurance offered me a job. I won't say they were the only ones, but it wasn't a very long list, let me tell you that. And I had 2 really good years there. And it coincided with my dad coming out of the army. He was in the Royal Corps of Transport, so driven pretty much all of his military career. Came out, decided to start driving a tipper lorry out of Botley in Hampshire. Went to a local insurance broker and said, oh, my lad works in insurance. You should have a chat. And the guy said, well, actually, we've got a job in our marine department. Why don't you send him up? So off I trotted a couple of days later for, again, another great company called Radcliffe and Company, who actually turned into Fastnet Marine on the yacht side, and Radcliffe and Co. Life and Pension. So both companies still around.
And that's as in the Fastnet, which was the round the world race as well.
Right? The famous race, the famous rock off the coast of Ireland. And they offered me a job. And I learnt so much. I mean, talk about being dropped in at the deep end. I remember vividly, it was the days of letters and memos were coming in, which was quite funky. I'm not old enough to remember telexes, but that'll put me in, for anyone who knows that sort of thing, that'll put me in that sort of slot. So, and I remember bless them, there was a backlog at the time, so I decided that I would put all of these memos, literally pile them up from the floor, and then try and pin together the ones that were chase ups. So this pile, and I'm probably exaggerating it, I do a bit of fishing on the side, so the fish I either catch or miss out by the end of the day, or recounting them are 4 foot longer. But so this pile I thought was about 6 foot high from the ground. By the time I'd pinned all the chasers, it was about a third of that, and I thought, oh, actually that's quite a methodical way to do things. And I had 4 great years there. I was lucky enough then to be be sought out by a company called Bowring, who became Marsh, who are probably, depending on how you quote it at the moment, the world's largest insurance broker. And I had a very, very happy 14 years with them, working primarily on the real big super yachts. So that was my first foray into that area. I then got the opportunity to go to London and work for a company called AIG, and then into Lloyd's with a syndicate called Brit, and latterly Markel. So that was almost for me if you like, the pinnacle, because I call it the big boy chair. It's probably the big person chair is the politically correct way of saying that. But that was where you're sat in a chair, expected to make pretty big decisions. We were seeing yachts at the time up to $400-500 million, something like that. I had within my capacity a $50 million stamp, so that's $50 million of the company's money to put down, primarily as the lead insurer. So you're sat there, the brokers queue up, you look at the risk, and you either put the stamp down or you don't. And that was quite an interesting. I mean, I have to say I love the theatre of it. I don't know if you've been into Lloyd's, but I had to pass an exam to go in. It's the ultimate ivory tower. But every day. I mean, I even bought myself a chalk striped suit because I thought I needed to play the part. And when I got the job, I bought myself a rather nice pen just to sort of to really
ensure you had all the relevant tools. But the interesting thing when we chatted before, which I thought was really cool, and this really resonates for me and the business, is that although you've got this global reach, extraordinary business, the huge turnover and fantastic client base and those things, is that human value bit of it. That we're local. I don't think we realised when we first got introduced how local we were, but I'm very proud of being South Coast and a local boy in that context. But that was something which really came through when we were chatting, that despite being a large global player, the family values, because I think you mentioned originally, the business that was founded by Harold Brown, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that family ownership and values is still maintained in the business, because for me, that's one sort. Is it unusual? I don't know. I think success stories come from those that really value their customers and put themselves in their shoes. But I guess it's also because you're dealing with, and again, these paraphrasing your words to make me look good, to be honest with you. You talked about the fact that it was definitely viewed as a luxury purchase. I mean, anyone who's lucky enough to have a yacht and be talking to you about this stuff, fantastic. But it is a really personal thing, a boat, isn't it? I mean, I've been in that space a little bit, but not to the dizzy heights you guys are involved. But a boat somehow is different from having a car or a bike. You live in it, your possessions are there, and all those things. But therefore, that family connection and having a personal relationship with your customers. I mean, you talked about that a lot, so I wonder whether you want to just talk on that a bit further.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, I mean, it does. Mr. Pantaenius set the company up in 1899, as you said, and the modern guys, Harold Baum, was 1970. And funny enough, we were at the Dusseldorf last week, actually, again, a massive yacht show, and the family host a film evening, one of the evenings. And the first film that we saw last week was a history of those 125 years.
So I thought you'd say Titanic or something like that. That would have been...
No, definitely not. No. I think we all know how that one ends. No, this one was hopefully is just the first stage. But I sat next to a good friend of mine, and I just said to her, I said, if anyone ever asks me what's the difference between Pantaenius and many of our other fine competitors, I just pointed to the screen and said, it's this. We've got this collection of people at the Dusseldorf Yacht Club with the family, just looking at all those things. So, I mentioned Ivory Tower when I worked in the Lloyd's building, and that was ultimately what that was. It was a fairly closed shop. We're not like that. I took over the handling of this business in the UK for the company 5 years ago. And I'm never going to pretend to be at the cutting edge of management, forethought and things like that. But ultimately, what became very clear to me very, very quickly was that good old-fashioned customer service was just wherever I looked, I didn't find it. That's true of my personal life, business life, but actually, coming back to the boat being such a key thing, people want to talk about that. Now, if you go right up to the mega yachts you see out there, maybe the owners talk amongst themselves, but I sense less of a feeling of pride in the boat.
Yeah.
Where, and again, you come down from those dizzy heights to what can be quite modest boats sometimes, but nice boats, and people want to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
I ride when the weather's nice, my Vespa. Now, I'm not really one of, mega into all that sort of stuff, but I think that's a bit of the same sort of mentality that I dare say most of the individuals with these bikes have got, countless others and cars and homes and all that stuff, but the Vespa's the key thing. So, and I think the boat is also very much that because ultimately with some obvious limitations, you can go anywhere around the world. If you've bought yourself a little sailboat, you can imagine yourself.
It's the thing of dreams, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like when you talk about your Vespa, it's got a soul, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's different. When you get on it, you think, oh, this is sort of special. And it must be like that, having a boat. I mean, when we chatted last time, one of the things that, again, resonates, and of course, there's a place for all these different models, so I'm not being disparaging at all, but to quite a large extent, I was literally chatting with my colleague Adam, actually, about this a minute ago. When you think about the insurance interactions we have on a daily basis, household and cars and stuff, the market has just become so commoditized. It's all about pilot high, sell it cheap. Now it just doesn't feel that those values resonate at all when you're talking about something so personal, which is why it makes total sense. While it's a hands-on. You used the phrase when we chatted before. It's a 24-hour world where you're living in. When you're dealing with values that you are, people want to pick up the phone and talk to someone they know, not go online and do a chat or a robot or something like that. Now that takes infrastructure and costs and all those things. But I think it's interesting. It's a different dynamic for you guys, isn't it? Oh
yeah, definitely. I mean, it really, really is. I mean, going back to that good old-fashioned customer service, key for us is the choice. Now, some customers absolutely want to be online. They just want to do it, and that's the way they want to go. Others want to phone. Others want to walk into the office. So we've got offices. I don't want to be critical of our competitors because they all do a great job within their sphere. Many of them have chosen to go down that online route. And that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. That works. But when you're talking to a client who tells you about the time they came back from the Azores, or they did this, or they did that, or even their favourite pub on the Isle of Wight that they go to, and then all those things, it just, God, I don't want to sound too cheesy, but I think it sort of enriches the experience if you also know, oh yeah, well, I know where that place is because we've taken a little boat there, or we have customers that we've spoken to all over the world. So I think it really does boil down to that choice, that if the customer does want to phone us, then they absolutely can. And you speak to the staff, and they'll have customers that have been with us 30 plus years, and they've talked them through. I mean, we had an older gentleman who, I think it was last year, that had finally given up on the boat. I think the gentleman was 88, something like that. Wow. So we sort of said to the person who'd been dealing with all those years, why don't you pop up there and take him a bottle of something and just sort of say thank you, because this isn't, okay, we're all in a business. Ultimately, profits and losses and all those things are important. But actually, if you look at someone, take that individual who's been with us for that long, even if he's paying £300 a year, that's a chunk of cash that's come our way. And
it is, and I think one follows the other anyway, don't you? I mean, I think, if you loyalty and, if you provide people with a great service, I know definitely I feel this way. I'm happy to pay a premium if I feel safe in someone's hands around a sensitive subject like, like what was the word I use? These luxury items, or, the things you feel close to. So it makes sense. But I mean, there can be no better flag, if you like, to say you're doing the right things if someone's staying with you for that sort of period. So that's got to be good.
Yeah, I mean, we value that extremely highly. I mean, we're focusing this year, for example, on we're now in our 35th year in the UK. We were the first satellite, if you like, from Germany. That goes toe to toe with anybody, literally anybody in the market. And the UK insurance market on the yacht side has changed over the last year. There's been some mergers and acquisitions, so some of those good old names that I would have known when I first started just aren't there anymore. And I think that feeling of continuity, and certainly with the boat owners, is something they value, because they want the insurers to understand that actually, we went on this trip, we did that trip, we did this, and particularly where the boats can go anywhere. If someone comes to us and the first thing they're going to do is a really tricky passage, Northwest Passage, right, a classic, right up route. No one's going to write that in year one, because it's the chances of something happening are fairly high.
Yeah.
I talk a lot about partnerships. without being too cheesy, this is a partnership, hopefully, that lasts for as long as we had with that kind gentleman. But, we look at we analyse our work, we're sort of 4 or 5 year relationships as average. So that's pretty good when you think about compare the market and the go compare and all those things. It's just literally 1 year. I almost sense that they're custodians for a year, and that's about how they feel, as opposed to an advisor and all the really important things that we like to get to. So,
it feels like a much more promiscuous, that's the wrong word for me, but relationship. It's about, satisfying my obligations. I've got to be insured.
Yeah.
The terms and conditions are probably the second thing that people are reading, and actually quite often when they start to look into that, I'm sure they'll think, well, hang on a second, I'm not quite covered in the same way. That's just the world we live in, isn't it? So, and there's I do get that as well. Well, I mean, we're clearly on that digital end of things, but we always talk about the fact that this is a blended approach, but ultimately it ends up with human beings. And even if you're using digital tech, just to slightly, bang our drum, the reason we exist is because we've reinvented something which, to be frank with you, was horrible to deal with. Customers didn't like it when they had to deal with that type of approach. So I totally get that side of stuff. It's just interesting, the fact that when you're dealing with something of the ilk you are, you have to twist slightly to make sure you're doing right by the topic. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, from our perspective, it's that's the way we choose to do it. Many others don't. We absolutely have the digital stuff underpinning a great amount of what we do. That's the modern world, and why wouldn't you take advantage for that? But I'm often heard quoting that we can all do the grip and grin, and I find myself luckily being able to travel and do some nice things and go to some nice events and fronting up and having a drink with somebody and doing that's the easy bit. I want to make sure that if things go wrong or there's a problem for the client, they can find us, and they're phoning me, they're phoning my colleagues in our Plymouth office, rather than going through a call centre and there being no relationship. And again, without being too cheesy, if something does go wrong, or, and particularly a claim, that's our shop window. Pride ourselves on the service the guys in the claims team keep doing. It's market leading. I would absolutely say that, and that's what counts. That's what people remember. Not I saw him once at a soccer match and we had a beer and he was a good lad type thing.
Good lad,
It's those things, and just we want to be in the community. We're based in a marina ourselves. Our office in Plymouth is in a marina. I mentioned to you that our owning family like to have presence on the water at most of our locations. So you'll often find us in and around regattas and that sort of stuff. Just understanding. I talked to someone the other day who at a boat show was looking to get a relatively small rib, and I understood what they meant about solent chop, because I know that the distance between those two waves, if your boat's smaller than that, it's
wet.
Yeah, exactly. And just being able to converse with a degree of familiarity for us is important, as I say. For others, they choose to go one way, and that's absolutely fine.
And yes, you'd almost think we'd rehearse this, Mike. That's the perfect segue into the next thing I wrote down here. So you talked about community there. So, the social value stuff is a big one for us too. We took the decision a couple of years ago to invest in B Corp, and the team are really passionate around that. That lifts itself, in your case, into your involvement with a thing called Wet Wheels, the charity, which after we spoke, I was reading about. We're involved to hopefully an increasing extent with a water-based thing down in Cornwall, actually. In fact, it's all around the country, called Wave Project, which I'm hoping we're going to get more and more involved in. But when I read about that, it was really interesting, because it was Jeff Holt that established that, wasn't MBE, the guy who was the first disabled person to sail around Great Britain. But amazing stuff. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Absolutely delighted to. Yeah, we know them really well. Where we're in and around the water, I remember seeing the Wet Wheels boats coming past. And for those of you who don't know, that they're catamarans made by a company called Cheetah Marine on the Isle of Wight, and they're specifically designed to take wheelchair users. So wheelchair users on a boat, water, not normally bedfellows you come to think about. But the one thing that we went down to meet Jeff and a couple of the guys at their base in Gun Wharf, and Jeff was great, put us all at our ease. I was so concerned about saying things that I might use the wrong words and all those things, and he was absolutely brilliant. He said one line which suddenly really struck home for me. He said that many of their customers, clients, They're typically younger folks, but there is no age restriction. He said some of these people, and many of them have got really debilitating issues and life-limiting issues. And some of them have done lots of fun things, where they've been in a sports car or they've done this or done that. But what he said to me, which really struck me, was that the thing with Wet Wheels is the whole family can join in.
Yeah.
So as opposed to standing on the side and going, oh, look, little Johnny's hurtled past in a rally car, and that's a fantastic thing, don't get me wrong. But actually, they can be on the water with them and all share the day. And I've had the great privilege of being out on a couple of
amazing.
And I remember it was quite a spray day, lots of water chopping in. There was a young girl who spent a lot of she was in a wheelchair and spent a lot of time asleep. That's her sort of standard. That's what the day looks like. But I was sat next to her, just sort of enjoying being out there. And I glanced at her, and the spray hit her in the face. I thought, oh God, that must be unpleasant. And her tongue just sort of licked her lips a little bit, and she smiled. And actually, I'm getting emotional thinking about that. But
yeah.
And I got off that boat and I said to Jeff, yet again, if I needed anything to revalidate our commitment, which I don't, I've just had it there.
Yeah, amazing. The water is just, there's something therapeutic about the sea. I don't think I could live far from it. We talked about this, didn't we? It's like I've spent my whole life, in and around the Portsmouth area. I love the sea, and I can totally understand what you do with Wet Wheels. There is something really special about being on the water if you're able-bodied, let alone if you're less able-bodied. So I can totally understand that. It's just an amazing thing to be involved in. How many boats? Do you know how many boats they have now? I know the first one was back in, I think I was looking at it.
They must be up to, gosh, they must be 10 by now. Forgive me again.
It's fantastic.
Jeff recently did the round Britain on one of the Wet Wheels boats, and the current project they're working on is, I think, getting 4 more boats. And so they're up in Scotland. They're all over the place. So, and it's if anyone does want to get involved, have a little look. They're incredible, and we're quite keen to sort of speak to people if we can. I mean, we did some stuff with the Knights Foundation last year. Guy Nicky Banger, that any of you who know football, played for Southampton amongst other teams. He also played for Eastleigh, my beloved Eastleigh Football Club, so I knew him from there. But we were able to open up one of our days on board to him and his guys. So they took some of their folks out as well. So that was to sort of roll it along a little bit. So
amazing.
That's really important.
Very cool.
I spend a lot of my day, like I'm sure you do, doing some fairly technical things and government things with what we have to do. That just reminds me of actually what it's really all about. So
it takes you back to reality, doesn't it? Values of life and stuff. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, I should have warned you on this, and forgive me. So if we have to cut this a bit, but it's been really fascinating, and really enjoyed chatting to you on the few occasions we've chatted. So thanks so much for participating. What I always tend to do at the end of these, and we put a collage together at the end of the year, is ask people, like yourselves, that have been right through, the industry, experts in the field, if you could give yourself 1 or 2 words of wisdom, met your younger self before you set about on your career, what would be the words of wisdom you'd impart on to yourself in those early years with the knowledge you've got now?
Gosh, wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't that be nice?
They'd definitely tell you what not to do, wouldn't you? But yeah.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I think, to be honest with you, if I was given that chance, I'd probably tell myself just to be a little more patient. I quite like to push myself, hence me going up to work in the city and all those things. But there were parts of my career that I remember being frustrated at, but actually they've put me in the position of where I was then now. I met this guy once at a boat show in Fort Lauderdale, a little bit of a slight name. And he said to me, I was probably pushing on and bleating on about something. And he said, oh, you can't fast track experience. And I thought, I was about to go back and I thought, right, no, take a breath, because actually, and I find that particularly now, where I can deal with things, and I'm not saying I know everything, far from it, but I can deal with things in a far more rational and well-rounded way than I would have done if I hadn't been there, done it, got the T-shirt. And that's probably something that a 55-year-old would say, and an 18-year-old young pup trying to push would go, no, that's absolutely nonsense. If you're good enough, you're old enough, to use a sporting analogy. So I think I would probably do that and just say, look, take a breath, enjoy the fact that here you are at Fort Lauderdale at a boat show. Here you are talking to these customers in South America. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do find that one really good example. My wife and I were at a boat show in Italy. She came down with me, and they did on the Saturday a little sail race from Genoa around to Portofino. So I don't know if you know that
Yeah,
well,
stunning,
but
my God.
Portofino, amazing. It's where all the film stars go and all. I think Mr. Rooney got married up there. And they had a reception on a mega yacht when we got there. And we were still on the front of this yacht, and this thing must have been 200 feet long, a proper boat. And there's people trying to take your picture and all sorts. And I just said to my wife, I said, oh my goodness, look at where we are. We're two folks from Southampton or East the area, and here we are stood in Portofino on a mega yacht with a glass of whatever going, and you think, life's treated me okay as far as that's concerned, for sure.
That's a really good one. Listen, Mike, thanks so much for giving us your time. I really hope people will join your webinar as well, because that sounds a really interesting one. I hope we'll stay in contact. But yeah, Mike, thanks for joining us on the session, and all being well, your success with the business will continue.
Thank you. I appreciate it and delighted to be involved.